We would also like to extend our thank you to industry co-host, Rajan Life Science, Health, Syngene and Medtronics, CEU Concert Takeda. We'd also like to thank international partner Region, Flanders, corporate sponsors, Bharat Biotech International, Gland Granules, New Vantage, Saptagir Laboratories Private Limited and Satories. Our session sponsors, Agilesius, Ernst & Young, Concepo, Milton Yee, MSN Labs, Satories and Virtuo. Our global sponsors and our associate sponsors, Biological E, Bharat Serum and Vaccines, Ferring Pharmaceuticals, Indian Immunological Limited, Natco, Roche, all our sponsors without whom this event would have never been possible. Now before we begin, I throw some light on our history of BioAsia. Over the past 21 editions, BioAsia had participation of luminaries from 100 plus countries, 25,000 plus B2B, B2R, R2R meetings, 250 plus letter of intents, bilateral cooperation agreements and MOUs. Over 30 knowledge papers and policy recommendations had been unveiled in the last 21 years of BioAsia. And altogether, the state has received trade and investment to an extent of $3.3 billion. So on that note, let us start with a huge round of applause for all of us to be a part of BioAsia. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the Day 2 of BioAsia 2025, where we continue to explore breakthrough innovations, transformative strategies, and collaborative opportunities, shaping the global life sciences and the healthcare ecosystem. We witness insightful discussions, groundbreaking perspectives, and inspiring leadership from global experts. Build on that momentum with another power-packed lineup of keynote addresses, panel discussions, and interactive sessions featuring industry pioneers and policymakers. I extend a special welcome to our distinguished dignitaries, esteemed speakers, industry leaders, and delegates who have joined us from all across the world. Your presence here is a testament to the shared commitment towards accelerating advancements in life sciences, digital health, and clinical innovation. So without further ado, let's begin an exciting second day of BioAsia 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, we begin today's session with our plenary address. Now, due to an unforeseen personal reason, Dave Rees was not able to join us today. He sends all of us his best wishes. Joining us in his stead is a renowned leader who has been at the forefront of innovation and in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Saptarshi Haldar, Vice President Research, Amgen, to deliver the plenary address. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome him with a huge round of applause. Wow, what a welcome.
Thank you to the BioAsia Organizing Committee. It's really an extraordinary time to be here, to be in Hyderabad and to be in biotechnology. My name is Saptarshi Haldar. I'm a cardiologist and a molecular biologist, and I lead Amgen's cardiovascular and metabolic drug discovery based in San Francisco. So as many of you know, this Monday we had a wonderful ribbon cutting and inauguration for our new site, Amgen India, which is just down the road. And it made me think, why is Amgen here in Hyderabad and in India? So many of you know our global mission is to serve patients suffering from serious diseases all around the world. So I believe we're here in India today because we together have a once-in-a-generation opportunity, what we're calling a hinge moment, to transform the lives of patients together at the intersection of, one, rapid advances in science, two, unprecedented new technologies such as artificial intelligence, and perhaps most importantly, all of this galvanized and catalyzed by India's immense talent. So I'm going to dial down, what is this hinge moment that we're talking about? Well, I believe that it's fueled by two things. The first is data, and not a small amount of data, but an enormous amount of data. We're talking about a number that we term terabytes, or even bigger, zettabytes. 181 zettabytes is what we approximate is the data generated by the global citizens of the Earth every year. So what is a zettabyte? Zetta is the Greek prefix for 1, followed by 21 zeros. So that's an astronomical number, and it's really hard for humans to comprehend. So I'm going to put it into a little bit of perspective with some examples. So many of us have these things, right? These standard smartphones, and these hold 128 gigabytes these days of data capacity. So the data generated by the world in a single day is the equivalent data capacity of giving every single person in India one of these, and every single person in China one of these. So even that is hard to comprehend. So I know there's a lot of movie fans in the audience, and kudos to the state of Telangana to have one of the most robust movie industries in the world. So 181 zettabytes is 36 trillion digital movies, feature-length films, not shorts, and this is a lot. So I asked a person to watch one movie every single day to get to 181 zettabytes of movies. It would take 7 times the lifespan of the universe to achieve. So I think you get the picture. This is a lot of data. And where's that data coming from? Well, 1/3 of that data is coming from us, our industry, the biomedical field and biomedical innovation. So we're going to be transformed by this. So, and where is that biomedical data coming from? It's coming from new experimental methods. It's the genetic information of hundreds of millions of people, care records of health systems and nations. We're talking doctor's notes, blood tests, CAT scans, all of it. And it's the genomes of single cells from every tissue in the human body. So how do we make sense of all this complex data? It's only tractable by novel analytical methods and computational power, machine learning, and the rise now of generative AI. So like one of my scientific heroes, and I'm a student of history, my scientific heroes, the Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell, who in the 1800s unified electricity and magnetism and told us that they're not separate things or kind of like each other, they're actually the same thing. And with that, Maxwell explained the fundamental nature of light. So in that analogy, we are witnessing a merger of biology, on the right on the slide, and technology. And it is a unification. They are the same thing. And with that, we're going to take the same fundamental science and unravel human biology and improve human health together. So the advances we are seeing with AI are essentially fracturing something we call Moore's law. So I know this is a technical audience. Many of you may know that Gordon Moore, legendary chairman of Intel, stated in the mid-1960s that computing power would roughly double every 2 years. And that's actually held for 6 decades. And I'm actually part of the generation that grew up with this twofold logarithmic growth. I cut my teeth playing Pong in the 1970s and programming 8-bit processors. And I trained in medicine in the early era of handwritten paper charts and when you had to go look at plastic films for x-rays. And now we live in a world that has been transformed by electronic medical records. So let me tell you that humans have a hard time wrapping their heads around exponential growth. And Moore's law was hard enough. If you look to the right here, it's going to be hard to predict how this technology is going to affect us, but these large language models, I told you that number 2, they're growing at about 100 times more powerful every 2 years. So we're not going to be able to comprehend the impact, but it's coming. This is the world that we're living in. So Moore's law has indeed been fractured. So I'm not going to expound on technical innovation in the AI field. Frankly, I know that there are many experts in this audience, and this community is innovating at rapid speed in that space. And it's going to be hard to predict how this technology is going to evolve over the next decade, but it will evolve, and it will impact everything that we do. So, you know, in my world at Amgen, as I said, we're here to serve patients. So what I'd like to do is share with you a handful of vignettes about how we're leveraging AI across the spectrum of the value chain in pharmaceutical innovation, ranging from the earliest aspects of discovery all the way to post-marketing. So, vignette number 1, protein engineering and protein therapeutics. At Amgen, we have a long-standing legacy in engineering proteins to make drugs. And as many of you know, a drug candidate has to thread a lot of needles to make it to the clinic. We talk about affinity and avidity and ideal pharmacokinetics, stability, manufacturability, to name a few things. And traditionally, we've done this by iterative trial and error, by making changes to the protein, bringing it back to the wet lab, assaying the molecule, and going back to the drawing board until we get it right. So let's take an example of one of those critical features. It's called viscosity. And I know that viscosity doesn't sound like the flashiest thing to talk to a molecular biology, an AI audience, but it's actually really important for patients, and that's what we care about the most. Because a patient is not going to be able to administer a drug that has the viscosity of syrup through a small needle of an auto-injector device. And that really matters. So our drug candidates, after jumping through all these hoops, need to live in a very narrow range, a Goldilocks zone of viscosity. But imagine this, if you could build an algorithm that could simply take the amino acid sequence of a protein and computationally predict the key attributes prior to these cycles of wet lab-based testing. Well, that's exactly what we've done at Amgen. We built a training model based on decades and terabytes of data on protein sequence and viscosity. And now, I'm happy to say that we can predict with more than 80% accuracy that a protein will be in that right Goldilocks zone of viscosity without ever doing a wet lab experiment. And what does that really mean? It means higher success rates, faster cycle times, and more drugs to more patients quicker. So I talked about viscosity and drug properties. How about a deeper understanding of human disease? So Amgen has been on this for a long time, even before the AI revolution. For over a decade, we had the belief that the era of large-scale human data was soon upon us. So based on this foresight, over 10 years ago, we acquired Decode Genetics based in Reykjavik, Iceland, a global leader in human genetics, now fully integrated into Amgen. And at the time of that acquisition, we only had about 4,000 whole genome sequences. So fast forward that now, over 10 years, we have now access to over 1 million whole genomes and increasing. And you couple all this to all forms of digital human data that's captured in the record: height, weight, cholesterol levels, risk of a heart attack, asthma, cancer, proteins in the blood, anything that you can measure and anything that exists in the electronic health record, now including raw data from medical diagnostics such as MRI scans. And to boot, the comp power, we now have placed an NVIDIA SuperPod, placed in Reykjavik, powering this science, and interestingly, fueled by their unique national geothermal energy grid. So you'll see more coming out of this. And I'm going to give you an example how we're leveraging this for patients in my area, cardiovascular. So here's a use of AI that's absolutely near and dear to my heart and many of your hearts as well, literally. We have effective preventive therapies in cardiovascular disease, yet current tools for risk prediction are simply not good enough. So for many patients, a major heart attack or a stroke or sudden death is their first presentation of atherosclerosis. And I know personally that this remains a huge problem in India and for Indians all over the world where the disease is different. It's unfortunately not unusual for men and women of Indian descent to have a heart attack in the age 30s or 40s. And I can tell you personally, my own uncle died suddenly at an age of 44 from a massive heart attack. So this is very personal for me. So we asked our colleagues in Iceland a simple question: can we do better? So they tackled this by analyzing over 13,000 Icelanders, as you can see in the blue over there, who had never had coronary artery disease, and of whom 1 in 10 had a heart attack many, many years later, as seen in the red heart over there. And all of them had their genome sequenced, which only needs to be done one time because the genome is what you're born with and it's static throughout life. However, Decode also collected serial blood samples over many, many years, which allowed them to measure the proteome, proteins in the blood, approximately 5,000 proteins simultaneous in the blood. And unlike the genome, the proteome is dynamic, changing with environmental factors such as age, what you eat, disease progression, and it therefore captures how the genome interacts with environmental factors to drive disease. And what we found, if you look at the bottom, was that a proteomic risk score that we derived nearly doubled our ability to find these high-risk patients from this incredibly heterogeneous pool, substantially outperforming genetics alone. And as we get better, this is going to tell us about individual risk and how to best intervene, not only for geographies and ethnicities, but even for a single patient. So this is the future. So now we're integrating these proteomic risk scores in exploratory biomarkers in some of our trials with the goal of one day developing diagnostics that are going to allow us to take risk stratification to a whole new level. And potentially, we're going to run clinical trials differently in the future. And ultimately, we're going to try to get the right drug to the right patient, creating value for the entire healthcare system globally. So this is literally AI creating the future of precision medicine. All right, clinical trials. How about AI helping us enroll clinical trials more efficiently? As many of you know, the rates of patient enrollment is a major bottleneck in the speed of clinical trial execution. It's been historically very, very hard to predict which clinical trial sites are going to be the best enrollers. So at Amgen, we've developed a machine learning algorithm called Atomic. And Atomic ranks clinical trial sites based on hundreds of potential predictive factors on their rates of enrollment. And what we've been able to show now on a fairly large data set is that when we apply this model, sites selecting using the Atomic model enroll about 2.5 times more efficiently than sites by the traditional means. So that is an enormous increment in the clinical operations realm, as many of you know. And we're applying this across the entire portfolio, generating a new version of this model, and hope to accelerate clinical trials using this technology. And our final vignette, what about regulatory documents? You know, we as an industry generate tons of regulatory documents, and they're very important in this business. So about a year ago, we sat down as we were collaborating with a pioneering artificial intelligence firm and gave the team a very simple task. We said, all right, let's see if we can start writing portions of an FDA filing using AI, large language models. And it's kind of a no-brainer which document or module to choose. It's the CMC module, Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls for the FDA. And why? Because it's a highly regimented and templated document, as you can see by that funnel on the far right. And we've got 40 years worth of data on that at Amgen. And for us, that filing module is about 1,000 pages. And at the end, you have to write a 20-page overall summary, a quality overall summary, or a QOS. And once you generate that module, you have to prepare this summary. So we told them, let's see if we can develop a prototype that will write the QOS. And the process for this is a rather structured approach, as I can tell you. So they went to work, and then they came back and they shocked us on 2 dimensions. One, they came back in 6 weeks, not 6 months when we were expecting them. And 2, when they pressed the button, In about 30 seconds, they generated a QoS that was indistinguishable from a team of about half a dozen regulatory efforts working for 2 months to generate. So tremendous productivity. So it's not far-fetched to imagine that in the not-too-distant future, it may very well be possible to submit an entire filing in one click. So I'll end here. I've told you the vignettes, and we're going to go back to the beginning. So from these examples, you can absolutely see that we're indeed at a hinge moment. And from my experience here at our ribbon-cutting ceremony for Amgen India, I've really firsthand seen a glimpse of the promising future here. The intersection of creative science, cutting-edge technologies, and most importantly, truly remarkable talent in India. So for everyone at Amgen India and its incredible Hyderabad and Indian ecosystem, we're going to need you. We're going to need your passion and your creativity to chart the future of healthcare together. And together, we're going to serve the patients around the globe that are really counting on us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Halder, for sharing those invaluable thoughts, insights, and the lovely presentation. Now, to thank you, I may invite Mr. Tanmay Krishna, Associate Vice President, Telangana Life Sciences, to please join me on stage to present a small token of appreciation and a thank you to Mr. Halder for his presentation. Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, sir, for a wonderful start of Day 2 of BioAsia 2025. On that note, next we are honored to welcome a distinguished leader in the digital transformation and healthcare innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Mr. Dave Williams, Executive Vice President, Chief Information and Digital Officer, MSD. Yeah, you can be louder. Yes, you can cheer. Go ahead. Yes.
Good morning. It's always good to have some friends in the front row. So I am thrilled to be part of BioAsia 2025. I have to say, I have one of the best jobs at MSD. I have the privilege of leading about 5,000 digital innovators that enable our entire company. I also believe that the opportunity has never been greater to leverage technology to transform our entire industry and compress time for patients. Today I'm going to cover 3 points. The first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about that opportunity. Second, I'll share what needs to be true for us to capture the opportunity. And lastly, I'll touch on a little bit of what MSD is doing in the digital space to also capture that. But first, a little bit about MSD. MSD is a science-based company, and our purpose is simple. It's to save and improve lives. Over our 130-year history, we've brought hope to humanity through the development of medicines and vaccines. We operate in multiple therapeutic areas, including oncology, vaccines, and cardiometabolic, to name a few. And most importantly, last year, with our products, we touched nearly 500 million patients across the world. MSD has a proud, long history in India as well. We also operate in multiple therapy areas, including oncology, diabetes, vaccines, and animal health. We're also proud to manufacture products in India for India and the rest of the world. And just this week, we opened our new technology center in Hyderabad, and by the end of this year, we expect to have roughly 2,700 employees, and in a couple years, I fully expect we'll double that number or more. So emerging technologies are fundamentally changing the way medicines are discovered and developed, accelerating delivery of life-saving medicines to patients globally. Now, I know this audience is familiar with the process in pharma, but I'd like to just take a few minutes to explain the end-to-end process to set context. So on the left side of this slide, the first thing you see is our discovery phase, discovery and development. And at a very high level in this phase, our scientists are looking to identify that's part of a disease, such as a protein or a gene. And then, like we heard from our last speaker, our scientists drugs to try and find one that demonstrates some activity against that disease target. Finally, we do what's called pre-treated by the body. So that's the discovery and development phase. Next, we move into our clinical phase. And which are focused on testing safety. Phase 2 is a little bit larger and focused on efficacy and also safety. And then we go into phase typically thousands of patients operated globally. We're looking at safety, we're looking at efficacy, and we're also looking at comparable process. We then manufacture at large scale, and the most important part, we deliver these to 12 to 15 years. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and today can impact this end-to-end process. This is especially true in the area of drug discovery and development. So I'd like to double click on this area and go a little bit deeper to show you an example. Side of this slide, you see some of the things I just spoke about. So target identification, lead optimization, compound identification, lead optimization, and then preclinical testing. Now also, the speaker mentioned, our scientists traditionally in the labs will use a hypothesis and intuition to design compounds with the right profiles. Going back to those pharmacokinetics or the ADME, where you're looking at how a drug is absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and excreted by the body. So it was a lot of trial. You're tweaking a molecule, you're doing that wet lab testing, you're looking at the results, you're fine-tuning, and you're repeating that cycle. Again, it's time-consuming, it's expensive, it's often frustrating for our scientists. We're moving from a largely wet lab manual approach to a lab that's heavily enabled by large data sets and AI/ML. So the modern-based will leverage a tool set and models that we've built to predict which structures and which modifications are likely to have the desired profile. And you'll screen thousands and thousands of those almost instantly. And the ones with the highest probability of lab-dependent process to one that combines AI/ML in silico with the wet lab. And this is just one example of how you can compress time for patients by leveraging. We have dozens and dozens of examples across the entire value chain, from clinical, manufacturing, our commercial operations, and even all of our functions. And so when you look at the totality of the impact that this can have on that 12 to 15 years, I ask, why can't we shrink this for patients? Why can't this be 6 to 8 years or less? And that's why, because patients need us to do that. So, what needs to be true for us to achieve this? Well, probably hundreds of things. I only have 15 minutes in the speech. And the first one I'll touch upon is probably the most important. We need digital innovators with a growth mindset. We look for digital innovators that are passionate about our mission to who are not afraid of some really complex challenges that we have to solve for, who are motivated by working side by side with our scientists in the lab, our engineers and entire business. We need digital innovators who have a growth mindset, who look forward to change very fast. And maybe most importantly, we need digital innovators who are passionate about driving change. So this is the first thing. Digital innovators will lead the way. As Chief Information and Digital Officer for this is one of my top priorities and something that literally keeps me awake at night. And why does it keep me awake? Well, my number one job is I have to make sure that everything runs well every day. You know, that we're safe and secure and well-performing for our business stakeholders. And, oh, by the way, we need to transform everything we do end to end. So we simultaneously need, but what that represents is the existing tools and applications. There are hundreds, probably 1,000 different tools up there. And the rate and pace of technological change, especially in the last 2+ years with generative AI. So you have the external world where innovation is happening at 1,000 miles that's deeply ingrained that we also want to transform. And the space between these two is getting bigger. So we need to shorten into your core business in order to compress time for patients. So the second thing we have to do is shorten constraint to change. Right? We can't have siloed technology. We have to have a backbone that's flexible, agile, secure, and well-performing. But it travels across that enterprise to get to patients. So if you have an enterprise or a backbone that's architected by function or departments, it makes it very difficult to operate in that kind of situation. And finally, you need. I'll share a quick story. When I started this job a little over 5 years ago, I went and spent some time in South San Francisco. I spent 2 days and I said, I want to see a day in the life. Show me how you work. Take me into the labs. Because I had heard that there was a lot of friction. I watched them, experience performance issues with applications, and I witnessed them in the labs taking data manually off one instrument and putting, for every hour I spend in the lab, I probably spend 3 hours documenting what I did. It would be amazing if for every hour, instead of an hour in the lab and 3 hours documenting, she could take that entire 4 hours and focus on the science. And we had a backbone and a data architecture where data consumed where it needed to be consumed in a compliant, controlled, secure manner. So the digital backbone is critically important. So what needs to be true? You need digital innovators with a growth mindset. We need to compress the technology adoption cycle, and we need a formula to leverage digital to compress time for patients has 5 components to it. The first one is information and digital transformation if your leaders are not aware of it and are not supportive of it. So you have to lead. The second thing you need is focus. If you think back to that chart I showed and you compare it to the news and how you marry those up with opportunities in your companies, and you have to bring those together and focus on the outcomes and clear on the outcomes and relentlessly pursuing those is what creates value. You need that frictionless flow of data across all parts of your company, and perhaps more importantly, in your company. This is not only great technologists, but it's helping business partners understand the role that technology can play in is a key enabler for this 5th priority, and we're extremely excited to start that.
Mr. Williams. Yes, now you can clap and cheer as loud as you can, because I saw you all were holding yourself back. Yes. I'd like to thank Mr. William, and to do the honors, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Ajit Shetty, the Chairman, International Advisory Board, BioAsia, to please join us on stage to present a token of thank you and appreciation to Mr. Dave Williams. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Now we transition into a series of engaging panel discussions that will bring together global leaders, innovators, and policymakers to explore the future of life sciences and healthcare. So our first panel shifting role of global capability centers in life sciences from traditional cost-saving models to value-driven innovation hubs, with an increasing focus now playing a crucial role in shaping the global healthcare industry. To guide this discussion, we are pleased to welcome our moderator for this session, Dr. CEO, Health Arc, to please join us on stage. I will also take this opportunity and call our esteemed panelists for this discussion, Mr. John, Vice President and Managing Director, Global Business Services, Novo Nordisk, Mr. Shivakumar Padmanabhan, MD and Head of to please join us, along with Mr. Mohit, Managing Director and Head of Business Insights and Technology, Hyderabad BMS. Mr. Fani Mitra, B, Global CIO and CDO, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Mr. Puneet Chopra, Head of Data, Digital and Technology. And Mr. Rajiv Onat, India Head of Technology and Engineering, Regeneron. As our panelists are right here, before we begin, we are honored to release the Expanding Horizons, the Maturity Journey of Life Sciences and Healthcare GCCs in India. And to do the honors, we have with us a vibrant personality, Mr. Sudeep Krishna, co-founder and president of Health Arc. First, ladies and gentlemen, let us capture this moment with one photograph. Post which I humbly request Mr. Sudeep, if you would like to Expanding Horizon and the Maturity Journey of Life Sciences and Healthcare, GCCs in India. Sudeep.
Thank you, Sabrina. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here and to introduce this session. We start our POV with a quote. We say that difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. And in many ways, that quote or the GCC journeys that a lot of life sciences companies have taken for the last few years. And every time we have worked with GCCs and looked at helping them with their GCC journeys, in many cases start with the processes or the functions that are less complex and that are non-core. But in life sciences, in our experience, it's the other way around. In many cases, we not only look at optimizing costs as we go along in these GCC journeys, we also values. So it's an honor to have all these GCC Bangalore and Hyderabad. And in many ways, these three cities form the core of the entire life sciences GCC ecosystem in India. We have Siva from AstraZeneca, John from Novo Nordisk, Puneet from Takeda, Mohit from BMS, and very excitingly, we also have Fani from Dr. Reddy's, where we'd love to hear his perspectives on how Indian life sciences companies are thinking about GCCs going forward. So with that, I would love to our moderator for the session, Dr. Purav Gandhi, founder and CEO of HealthArc. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudeep, for setting the tone discussion. I'll start with local first. Mohit, almost exactly a year last by inaugurated the BMS GCC. Probably 6 months ago you started. Before that you started hiring your team, and now wanted to hear about this journey, like how such a was undertaken, what was the experience, how did you get your global team as the center grew at this rapid pace?
Sure. So firstly, Bristol Myers Squibb is in the bold business, right? And we're looking at disease areas which we have to bring treatments to the centers very fast, right? So one important piece for us is how do we build a workforce that is very innovative and has a sense of urgency? And that's why we chose Hyderabad a year and a half ago. So if you really look at it, 18 to 20 months, we were now 2,000 people in Hyderabad, thanks to the ecosystem that is available in Telangana for us to do that. I think it started off with a very simple, I call it the vision and the broad core guiding principles. And I think we were very clear on what we wanted to build was a very of urgency, because there are a lot of patients who are waiting for our medicines every day. Every day's delay really costs lives at the end of the day. And I think part of the guiding principles, what was very important to also say what we should, because everybody gets caught up in this, I call it the value versus volume game, right? So we were very clear that we are here for value and we are not here for volume, because very soon you will see everybody gets into the thousands and the 10,000s and you figure out that, hey, am I really doing the right work that I should be doing or not, right? And that's very keen to the topic of what we've got here. So we were a bit more surgical in the value part of it. One thing we wanted also to make sure is value is a very broad spectrum, right? Because it can start off with automating and eliminating certain manual activities to breakthrough innovation, right? So from that spectrum perspective, where do you play to that spectrum is very important. And I think what led to us having a very simple principle was, guys, we play to that spectrum that adds value to the company's goals and aspirations. That's period, because we are here to serve the company, right? And I think 3-4 things got us there very quickly. One is we are very open that if we're going to be innovative, we have to get a workforce that comes from diverse background industry. And there is this little bit of this in life sciences, that you really have to be in the life sciences to be in the life sciences. We said, guys, we are open, we want to be innovative, and we can only get it when people come from different industries and backgrounds and different experiences. So I think that helped us move faster. And of course, where we wanted the specialist. The second piece that really was very well aligned to us was that we had a very report into the C-suite right now. And the C-suite was very enabling to clear out any roadblocks, right? Because that really helps to move fast, because you can't move fast without that sponsorship and support. And I think the C-suite was very supportive to also give the, what I call it, the empowerment, the autonomy. And I think that alignment also brings in very clear global objectives of what needs to get delivered. Last point I'll make is, I think we call this a very clear one BMS culture. At the end of the day, it's one organization that, and the one BMS culture only comes with the people, so making that investment day in, day out with the people, with the helped us move fast.
No, I think it's a fascinating journey, and I'm sure you have plans to continue this further as well. you were starting with a clean slate. I want to go to John. John, for you, it was a very unique story, right? You were here for almost what we talked about, 17 years. But then the journey is in two phases. It started 17 years ago, and then last 3 or 4 years, there's a very different momentum. The role of the GC. You talked about the culture changing, the kind of roles and seniority changing. So how did you go about this transition? What was the difference in mandate, difference in positioning of the GCC?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this morning. So Novo Nordisk in Bangalore now is just a little shy of 4,500 colleagues across about 17 functions. Of the top 10 global pharma companies are based here in Hyderabad. Probably the remaining 3 are amongst the 6 of us. So we've all got targets on our chests, ladies and gentlemen. But Novo Nordisk started in Bangalore 17 years ago, and we started as a shared service transactional business. But in the last, as you say, 3-4 years, we've grown by about 2,000 colleagues. And now if I stratify our workforce into what you might think as transactional roles versus specialist or senior roles, we're now 30 in favor of the senior or specialist roles. We've hired 3 specialists or senior folk. So the whole journey's been quite interesting. If I think about some of the challenges that we've, everybody knows a little bit about Novo Nordisk now, but perhaps 3-4 years on communication, on being sure that the external world understood who we were, our purpose, focus on patients, focus on why we trust along the way. And having all of those 17 functions, SVPs, trusting in what we do, we can deliver, and then grow from there has been really, really important for us. We constantly rolling out the red carpet and bringing folks to Bangalore, as I'm sure these guys also do. And that helps us build the trust with the HQ stakeholders, and everybody has seen the value that our organization can deliver. And as I close, perhaps there is a little uniqueness about Novo Nordisk in so much as we're a Danish-based company. The entire population of Denmark is about 1/3 of the population of Bangalore. So as this company scales and scales and scales, we had to look for skills and scale outside our home country. And we're super happy with what we have in India and continue to grow here.
That's great to hear, John. Siva, I'll come to you. You have had a fairly long run, and we were talking about how there's a transition that you have led AZ through from the GCC being a service or a product delivery organization to almost being clearly linked to business outcomes, being responsible for business outcomes. How do you do that sitting in India? How could you make that transition happen? How could you drive that change? If you can tell us about that process, because that's what I think now every GCC aspires for, right? To be responsible directly for a business outcome.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm Shiva Padmanabhan from AstraZeneca. We've been here 10 years, like you said, Purav, in India. And I would say it's been a process of maturing, right? Where initially, if I would equate this to like Lego blocks, initially you have these service or technology platforms or product teams that are very focused on making sure that you have a good Lego block, right? To what John also said, which is, can it be trusted? Is it something that that will hold up, when faced with, turbulences and so on. And then I think it was really around the time of COVID that we realized that all of a sudden that all of these capabilities and functions and teams we have put here in India can connect and really start to drive something very different. So when we looked at launching products during that period, we realized how all of these capabilities being in the same GCC, or at that time we call it the Global Technology Center, can really connect together and really start to deliver end-to-end value for the company, such as accelerating how we actually are developing and launching new products. That was like an eye-opener, because then we started looking at it not as individual blocks, but as something that can come together to build something more beautiful and bigger, and it can really impact the business. So from there on, I think we have been really now focused on saying, how do we actually look at these teams not only continuing to deliver for their vertical global organizations, but also how are we going to bring them together in a digital value chain. And one of the things we did at that time was rebrand from a Global Technology Center to a Global Innovation and Technology Center. And that was a very conscious thing to do, which is to say that we're going to now put all the leading new technology COEs in our India GCC first, before we go someplace else, right? So in that sense, we have actually put some more Lego blocks into the mix, if you can think about it as COEs for like virtual and augmented reality, and more recently the COE for generative AI. A lot of those things we added into the mix. So now what we are then seeing is that if you look at things like product launch, or getting into a new therapy area or new modality like cell and gene therapy, how can we take the capabilities that are in the GCC, weave them together to really create something of value for the enterprise? So that's a big focus now in the evolution of our GITC or a GCC, and that requires I think in the as we talked in the previous session, that was a wonderful session about how do you actually build that mindset to actually be innovative, to be agile, be experimentative, take feedback and change, right? And that's the next part of this journey, is about how do you build that culture of agile experimentation, culture of rapid adoption, which comes from agile experimentation, because if you're doing agile experimentation, you're likely to discover paths that lead to more enhanced or rapid adoption. So that's really where we're going. So that's been kind of the journey, from the Lego blocks to the bigger Lego object that takes up all these blocks.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. So the transformation, right? I want to use this as an opportunity to go to Puneet. Puneet, we talked about at Takeda, right? Like one of the things to ensure this innovation happens, you have been talking about is the culture that you build in the team, both in terms of consistency and patient centricity. And in some sense, it intuitively makes all the sense. Everyone should do it. And yet it is challenging to build it. Can you talk us through how have you gone about this journey? How has it worked in terms of inspiring people, retaining them?
Yeah, thanks Purav for the question, and BioAsia for the opportunity to be part of this esteemed panel. Before I answer that question, I want to celebrate a monumental achievement, which is that 60% of the GCC in the world, out of the total that we have, 60% of GCC are in India. I think it's a great achievement that requires, a lot of work that has gone, in terms of government, my fellow panelists, and everyone sitting around, right? I think it's a monumental achievement. Coming back to your question, right, let me also, talk a little bit about Takeda values and the ecosystem. So Takeda is a 240-year-old Japanese multinational biopharmaceutical organization. We are into innovative medicines and vaccines. And it's a very interesting story in terms of how we have taken our culture to the next level. When I joined this organization about 2 years back, I was in a meeting, and the first thing that I learned about is our PTRB, patient, trust, reputation in business. This is our philosophy. So we start with patient first, look at whether the opportunity is going to create a trust in the organization, how it's going to act from a reputational standpoint, and the business for us comes last. I was fascinated by seeing that kind of approach by an organization, really doing walk the talk. If you look at our values, right, we talk about integrity, honesty, fairness, and perseverance, with integrity at the core. So for us, from a GCC standpoint, it was never a first mover advantage game. We launched our first GCC this year. Yeah, we are late in the game, people might say that, but it was never a first mover advantage for us. For us, it's about doing the right thing the first time. And that's why we have took some years for us to understand what's that model that can really work for Takeda from a cultural standpoint, and how we can build people and talent which can really get integrated into our value system as well as our PTRB approach. So that has been some of our strategies in terms of how we get these people embedded into the business. For me, I am part of the business, right? So not looked upon as a transactional IT resource, rather look as a business enabler. See, transformation always happens top-down, right? And innovation happens, spreads like this. How do we integrate these two approaches to really make a transformation from a scalability standpoint, agility standpoint, speed standpoint? I think Dave also in the previous the session really talked great about mindset. I think you also touched about mindset. I think such an important aspect of having the right mindset, creating digital solutions which can really solve business problem. It's not about putting the cart before the horse, right? And not building solutions and then looking for problems. Rather the other way around, look at the problems and start building solutions who can really solve for those problems. That's the kind of culture and the mindset we are trying to build in our ICC called Innovation Capability Center in Bhartiya City, Bangalore. And I'm really excited to be part of the Hyderabad ecosystem, and looking at the talent here, I think there is an opportunity to scale up our ICCs into the beautiful location.
8 out of 10 should we count you in? So jokes aside, I think a very similar question I had for Rajiv as well. Right, Rajiv, when we look at Regeneron's journey, we've talked about complex, cutting-edge work being done out of India in the area of digital transformation. As Regeneron was looking at India, what was the thought process? How did you go about evaluating India as an opportunity, thinking that yes, this is something which can be effectively done in India?
Oh, thanks, Puro, for the question, and it is great to be on this platform, and it's always a great place to be, and every year it gets bigger and brighter, so kudos to the organizers in the state of Telangana for creating this amazing platform. Regeneron, it's a 35 plus year old startup. And that's how we operate. Even though we've been in this business for quite some time, the organization's mindset is very startup mindset. Science is deeply rooted in everything we do, and it's a science-first culture within the organization. Of course, it was founded by George and Len 35 years ago and still founder-led. And that itself says a lot about how we sort of use science to create life-transforming medicines and at the end of the day improve patient outcomes. Regeneron India specifically was started a couple of years ago. I'm still a rookie compared to some of the panel members here in terms of where we are. So the initial driver for us to establish this site was to really double down on our digital transformation capabilities. So we started thinking about, and there were, and as Mohit said earlier, I think we were also very clear about what the site should not be. In addition to what it should be or what shape it should take, we were also pretty clear what it should not be. We did not want this to be positioned as a cost efficiency outpost. We didn't want to call it, I mean, there are different labels that we give to these sites these days, from captive to ODC to GCC. And and our leadership refuses to label the site or pigeonhole ourselves into any of these definitions, to basically consider regional India as an integral part of region RON itself, and drive the global vision and be part of those strategic initiatives, right? And that's very fundamental to us. So what that has led us to do is we are pretty measured and intentional in our growth. We are not in the volume business. You're not going to see us go 1,000 plus, 2,000 plus quickly. We'll get there, but we'll get there in a very intentional way, intentional approach. So in that respect, we started off building computational science capabilities within the site. This is to help our computational science team and various science groups within the organization, and that evolved into other areas of digital transformation in the area of data, to really bring enterprise connected data ecosystem and being able to play a huge role in making sure, as we say, the next drug is in the data, and it's very important to make sure the data is connected and it is accessible in a secure and safe fashion to everybody who want to explore and derive insights out of it. So we moved into data, and then we started expanding into artificial intelligence. I think that topic has been sort of beaten to death in the last couple of days, so I'm not going to sort of dive deep into that area, but that is a critical capability that we also want to build within this group. So once we started demonstrating the value across these key portfolios, then we started expanding into outside technology. And then, the next big leap was to can we, leverage the clinical trials or conduct clinical trials in India. And today, I think we are proud to say that we are conducting 3 studies as we speak in rare disease areas, and 10% of the clinical participants globally are from this part of the world. And there is tremendous opportunities in that space. In fact, our disease burden in some of the areas like cancer is so high, but our clinical participation is still so low. And that's an area that we can significantly invest and grow. And that's an area we are looking to constantly sort of invest and grow as well. So the bottom line is, or the gist of where I'm going with this is, we are pretty intentional in the areas that we want to invest, and we also don't want to dilute the regional way of life, which is to lead with science, take on big ideas, be great together, and there is a way we have shaped that it's easy to acquire talent from outside, but it's a whole different game to make sure that talent understands the purpose and the meaning of why they are part of this larger mission of the organization.
Very interesting, Rajiv. I'll come back to that in the second round of the discussion. I have a follow-on question. But before that, I'd love to come to you, Fani. This is the question I've been holding back for last 3 days. So it makes all the sense for all multinational companies to come to India, take advantage of the opportunity, the talent, the ecosystem we have. But DRL's been here, it's one of those rare MNCs which has grown out of India and gone to the world. You have experienced the ecosystem, you have helped build the ecosystem. So now it's a very interesting And in some sense, not a very intuitive idea. To think about GCC for a company like DRL. Would love to understand how has that thought evolved at your side? How do you look at it when you think about your future growth?
Sure, and not intending to give FOMO to the rest of the participants, but we have been here for 40 years now in Hyderabad as a company that's born here. So it's a pleasure to see the city grow. It's a pleasure to see the ecosystem grow around us. Without calling it a GCC, Apura, we've been thinking about, it has been very organic for us in terms of how we have always looked at Hyderabad or the larger India setup as an integral part of how our growth story evolved over a period of time. We've called it with different names. We call them global COEs, we call them, GBS, home offices, with different names over the last few years. We've been experimenting with this idea, but primarily for three levers as I look at it. One is the obvious one around efficiency. How do you create efficiency in the overall value chain, because cost is an important factor. Being efficient is a very important part of the business model. So efficiency has always been one of the key drivers. The second lever was for us primarily around new capabilities, because one of the very few countries across the world where you can build a lot of new capabilities with the capacities that you need. So there is a little bit of that trade-off. And so the second key lever for us was capabilities. And the third one is, how do you create without calling it a center, which is sitting outside the larger ecosystem, how do you create a very organic, in the value chain, office that kind of caters to these new operating models that we're going after, right? So just to build a little bit on that, when we looked at efficiency, we've been looking at it always, with a frame of what we call internally as the specialization scatter matrix. In that sense, a very highly specialized job, very, very scattered across the globe, for instance, creates these inefficiencies because you have these very few bright people sitting very far away. It creates, they miss out on the economies of scale. They miss out on a lot of things. So it makes sense for us to push them, further into the center, or closer into the center as much as possible. And the low specialization, high scattered jobs have been a no-brainer. Many of the GCCs have started with that first, be it in finance, in HR operations, in the low-end part of the infrastructure, tech operations, etc. We've always seen that happen, as well, right? So in that scatter versus specialization matrix, we've always tried moving left as much as we can to create, less of a scatter, but that obviously creates efficiencies, as we speak. The second part of it is around capabilities. I think some of the folks on the panel were talking about, new areas like omni-channel marketing or digital marketing capabilities. There are a bunch of these new capabilities that probably were not very natural to pharma companies pre-COVID, if you ask me. While every one of us were dabbling with it, it just became a very, very big imperative, probably, pushed a lot through the COVID, right? Be it in deep science R&D, be it in commercial capabilities, or be it some of the elements around manufacturing, and digitalization around manufacturing, etc. We found a lot of capability-led capacity building as the second big lever, and that has been a big, thought for us as we were evaluating it. And the third one is, particularly for us as a company, we've been moving from being, started in this city as an API company to moving into formulations and then into specialty products and now into larger, consumer kind of products, as we looked at our recent acquisition, from Helion, or our joint venture with Nestle in India, Nestle Health Sciences in India. A lot of this push to the new operating models required us to create a very different kind of thinking to say, how do you create a deep science capability from here? The new operating models require us to think, very, very fresh as well. So these are the three main levers that actually helped us think through this. We have not been formally calling it the GCC. We've managed to, put it together as a cluster of capabilities. But we've actively been thinking about, does it make sense for us to actually call it a GCC and leverage a lot more? Because I think the last point I wanted to make is when you see, some of the functional processes being outsourced or globalized, there is an inefficiency factor that many of the global MNCs had in. A job that is one job in the US or in the Europe is around 1.7 in India roughly. That's the back of the envelope calculation that many of the companies do. I hope it is not, it's going to go away. But for us, there is an efficiency factor we want to bring in, because if you put the latest technology together along with the centralization, you might actually look for efficiencies than inefficiencies of that you get through lack of collaboration, things like that essentially kind of hang on to the GCCs, unfortunately. So I think that is another area that is interesting for us. So yeah, it's a unique position to be in, and feels good to be there. Yeah.
Very cool. I think that efficiency angle is very interesting. And strategically, you're based out of Hyderabad, and now the more work comes here, the more efficient it could get technically. So now that we've talked about the journey for different GCCs, right? No GCC conversation is complete without two specific things. One is talent, which all of us are fighting for, and the infrastructure, which helps us. A lot of companies, when they look at India, controversial to say, but would really think about, as you started this journey, how did you look at solving that? And did it work?
I think the short answer is, if you treat people as numbers, they will only deliver. ERB previously, how we have gone about creating an ecosystem which is hovering around our people. Everything that we have done transformative at Takeda, right? And how we delve into our, but when they are delivered to the patients. I think that's very, very important. Keeping that in mind, people into solving for their solutions, not the other way around. That has been our approach to, what you need is a talent and a capability to solve for that problem that you have identified, rather than the other way, getting those capabilities on board and then integrating them into the business, rather than they sitting in silo in whatever location. They could be sitting in Bangalore. We have one in India. We're going to soon have one in Japan and China, right? Now, if you look at these kinds, so we don't want our people to work in night shifts, to work in a siloed approach. Rather, they come as our people, bring in and start delivering onto the business problem, rather than being treated as one resource who is sitting in some corner and doing some great Java stuff or a class. It's not the approach that Takeda has.
Makes sense. I think capability is definitely one strong component. Also probably as relevant. And sure, we talked about setting a team which is truly global, sitting here in India, which has context on how to work on a drug launch in Europe or in Africa or in any other part of the world. But it's very easy to say that. How did you make it happen?
Yeah, I would say that we are still in the journey, right? I mean, no one's cracked it completely, but I think a few principles that we used right from the beginning was that GCC is just a location. So outside branding, we can use GITC or GCC, whatever, but inside the company, it is AstraZeneca India, right? AstraZeneca Chennai. And what that means is any role can be located here in India with any kind of responsibility to different hubs as well, right? So that's one of the fundamental aspects of the integrated operating model, which we think has been good for us, has been successful for us. So that, first of all, the global function and the teams that are sitting here. So that's really important. And then the second thing, moving from what capability you can build to what outcomes you can deliver. So right term, because the capability is still talking about building something, but it's really talking about how are you going to use it, how are you going to deliver for the business. So that's really where I think we are seeing that inflection to connect the capabilities together and build outcomes for the business, whether it be speed, whether it be cost, whether it be service, and so on. And to do that, you really need to have the business context. You touched on sales work or how cell and gene manufacturing works, but you really need people to be engaged in it. You need people what it's achieving for the business. So over time, I think we are getting to a place where there is more being a Java developer, to take that example. They also need to be able to say pitch that I am a Java developer developing the solution for patients in Turkey. So that needs to be part of the elevator pitch. It's a journey. I think as we mature, as we do work that is actually interconnected, I think people get more aware of what they're doing and be recognized for in the company, and that's the journey we are all of us are on, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, indeed. So that's about enter beyond the point. If you are in one location, you might run out of talent, but might fit into your culture also. And as an experience of your journey, the locations for a fresh perspective, does that add value or does that bring in an inefficiency factor? How
minds at the moment? I feel very, very lucky, to be honest. Here and a lot of the things that we're doing in common have really worked very well for us in Bangalore. To the levels approaching 90%. We've got the best place to work, ranked number 1. We've got an attrition which is below 6%, and we're developing people all the time. So then the decision about, well, do I go to another location? Because one doesn't want to dilute a very, very nice situation that we've got going in Bangalore. But I think it is inevitable that we do need to do that. Actually, last year, I should say that unlike many of our colleagues here, until March last year, Novo Nordisk only had one GCC in Bangalore. Then in March last year, we opened a very small center in Mexico City, which now has about 150 people. And we now look at, well, what does this global presence need? What does this India presence need? So to specifically answer your question, we are curious locations in India, and it's very specific decisions around talent, experience, and talent availability. As I mentioned, we have this very broad. We do cover almost the whole value chain. The beautiful presentation from our MSD colleagues are elements that probably would exist somewhere else in India, and that's probably the trigger factor for us to scale elsewhere.
I think makes sense. This I think sets it up perfectly for me to ask the next question to Mohit. Mohit, you've been in Hyderabad, help companies innovate and grow. Does it really have a large role to play? If yes, in what areas?
Yeah, no, thank you. On a lighter note, you just take people to some other city and then at the airport, go through the ORR, and 45 minutes you make a decision of being in Hyderabad, right? So I think that works very well to the ecosystem. Aspects that we were looking at, right? One was very clearly we wanted, especially for the life sciences piece, we want that is not comparable to anywhere else in the world, which is really available in Telangana. So that was one easy check mark. Get the talent. One thing I'll add to what the fellow panelists said, there are two important points, right? And I've gone through this a little bit in the BFI sector. I think more people complaints about talent not being available. I think we'll be at that mark in 3 years or 2 years, given what the government is doing, bringing in more life sciences, GCCs and companies over here. So I think in 2 to 3 years, we'll not even ask this question. We'll say, guys, it just works because there are so many people who will come in. The second point I'll make is that post-COVID, a purpose-led workforce, to start thinking about is, hey, how can I be more purposeful, make an impact of my life through the work that I'm little bit underrated. And I see that a lot when we are hiring people from different industries, because some other industry to this, and they said, guys, this is the post-COVID moment kind of created that for them. And I think we as GCCs and employers need to enable those opportunities. Quite a great government support. I think from anything you need, you just make a call and things get done in a couple of hours. I don't think it with the new government and the bureaucrats who continue to be there from the very time Telangana piece is, where are you going to find this infrastructure anywhere else in the world, right? I think we've got a top infrastructure which is growing at the same pace. Population is growing. We've got great top academics, right? We've got a very warm, welcoming, state and city that embraces people. Don't have any language barriers. I think if you just start putting those things into the mix, and of course, not to forget the great food, the place you want to be in. And I think that trifecta works very well, and that amplifies it. And we've seen that where lots of the country to come in and settle down here for what we build. So I think that's an ecosystem that thrives very well, and kudos.
Is continuously making a significant progress in terms of the ecosystem, and what the government continues to say is they're not done. There's still so much more to be done in terms of continuing to build this ecosystem, keeping it sustainable as the number of Question for you, DRL, like you said, has been 40 years in terms of shaping the manufacturing ecosystem, had a significant role to play. Similarly for the research ecosystem. As it comes to the digital ecosystem, what are some of that you are leading to ensure that the city continues to have that talent, that mindset?
Yeah, I see this as digital obviously has evolved from the time, we've now digital and almost as a business enabler to a value creator. I think there's a big shift that we have seen. I've talked about a lot of purpose-led value creation gets expedited, when you add digital to the mix. That are now coming in initially have been seen, at least in other parts of the world, as individual capabilities, but when you actually see there are a lot of new opportunities that have shaped up for us. I've given a couple of examples, but across the value chain, I think we've also had the previous speaker talk about it, but across the value chain, be it from our R&D, early stage that we have now taken to customers with. For instance, a lot of these places where a combination of data, put them all together, it has a significant value that is getting created as we see it, right? So in terms of capabilities, the core capabilities always have been built up. Like I said, the core digital around MES systems, the digital infrastructure that started off as a lever for compliance, particularly, has now started, building up a layer on top of it around data engineering, data pipelining for ML, AI. The point that I talked about, how do you create that efficiency factor when you think about, some of these core functions coupled with digital. I think that is a opportunity as we see it, because if we see them as two different COEs, I have an R&D or a clinical trials or a regulatory COE or a capability, and then I have a tech COE. If you see them as two different ones, there is a value lost in. Look at what I call as reg tech. Look at how generative AI can help us file dossiers in 40 plus countries, as we take a drug to, a lot of emerging markets, for example. Or how do you look at, AI for, chemistry, route of synthesis, things like that. I think there is a lot of that value that is getting unlocked for us. Most of our work is essentially in using digital for value creation in these areas, both in terms of R&D. For example, we have a World Economic Forum certified, digital lighthouse factory here in Hyderabad that serves commercial value chain, be it in marketing, be it in patient care, patient support. There are tons of opportunities that are opening up for us. And I think I know this done to death now, but in terms of generative AI, it's just so exciting suddenly because, we've always been an industry that made more paper, than pills, as we say, because it's just the regulatory compliance and a bunch of other things that just pulls back, in terms of speed and efficiency.
Thanks, Rajiv. Rajiv, I wanted to come back to where you started your conversation. You said, as you think about growing in India, you want to ensure you are being intentional about it, being purposeful about it, and makes a lot of sense. As you think about this growth, what are you've experienced it? There are a lot of opportunities. We've talked about that. What are some of the challenges you see, and how are you trying to?
I think from a challenge, there are challenges that is part of the organization. We are pretty sensitive to not to position these things as a lift and shift. And we want to nail what we started before we go broad. And I think, and as being one of the, I'm not sure if it's the same in other things. One thing that we constantly see is even though teams, different functional teams sitting out of the site, for them to collaborate, we have to make a round trip. Sometimes empowering, these fusion teams to able to accelerate to a common initiative or to a common outcome, I think would make sense, a lot more sense. So address that challenge without diluting on the overall intent challenge all the time. We are all tapping into the same talent pool in some way or the other. But more importantly, I think it is about once we analyze the regional way of life in our case, so that the job has a purpose. Otherwise, it's just a job, and we want to make sure that some of these things we foundationally correct them before we become a big organization. So these are foundational things that we want to sort of address from the get-go.
I think I have a few more questions, but I know we are at time, so perhaps I would conclude this discussion by saying, this is really an interesting time. Having grown up in India, like most of you have, we've always aspired to deliver at a global scale, and not just deliver, but deliver global scale. And very happy to see that the time has come in our lifetime, and yet there is so much to come in the. We talked about talent, the ecosystem, everything is really poised to grow in India in general as well. So very exciting times for us. Thank you all for taking the time, sharing your...
Well, that was an incredibly insightful discussion, I'm sure. A huge thank you to our esteemed panelist and moderator for sharing their expertise. To express our gratitude, Mr. Raj Babu, CEO and founder, onto the stage to present a small token of appreciation to our panelists, please. To our moderator and our panelists. Once again, I take this opportunity and thank our panelists to be a part. A special mention to our session sponsor, Azulesian and thank you for doing the honors. Let us capture this moment, so I humbly request our panelists and our guests to please step forward for a group photograph. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Moving forward to our next panel discussion, we now turn our focus to how industry leaders can navigate the transformative forces that are reshaping the future of health. It's going to be a very interesting conversation, and we have absolutely a right set of panelists to take this discussion forward. To guide this discussion, we are pleased to welcome our moderator on stage, Mr. Jerry Bruno, U.S. National Healthcare Consulting Leader, Deloitte, on stage. And now I would like to call our panelists on stage, starting off with Mr. Raj Gore, Chief Executive Officer, HCG, Healthcare Global Enterprises Limited, to please join us. Joining him will be Dr. Rajendra Pratap Gupta, President, Global Digital Health Corporation. Dr. Rajendra was also the author of Government Manifesto, author of National Health Policy, National Viksit Bharat, which is a flagship project for Make in India developed countries. So we welcome Dr. Rajendra Pratap Gupta. We would also like to call on stage Dr. Ilman Kumaran Kalyamurthy, CEO, Rela Hospital, on stage, along with Dr. Hari Prasad, Chairman and Non-Executive Director, Care Hospitals, and Mr. Alex
To present, ladies and gentlemen, dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, we have a very interesting topic of the health. But before I do that, and I talk a little bit about the panel, I'll also, and bear with me, it's a little bit of somber details, but something which bears a little bit of a tone for this panel as they navigate and grapple through some of these somber realities which I'm going to reel out now. First of all, India is fast becoming the cancer capital of the world. From 1.39 million for 5 years back to 1.57 million, for 13% growth in size. The dailies, which is the disability adjusted life years, projected to grow from 27 million in 2021 to 30 million in 2025. The most grim statistics of this is catching early. While the rate of screening in India is probably less than 2% as compared to more than 70% in China, 75% in the US, we are getting the incidence of cancer as early as 52. Is a median year for breast cancer. I'm quoting a very serious study done by a very venerated hospital chain in India. There are a lot of good work and a lot of good studies. Prevalence in women, breast, cervix and ovary. Most common in men, lung, mouth and prostate. So there is a lot of work to be done. Coming to mental health, 1 in 5 is depressed in the 18 to 25 age group. That's a very serious matter. Excuse me. 4 is at risk of disturbed sleep. Coming to BMI, 3 in 4 obese or overweight.
And that's not even counting the waist-to-hip ratio or visceral fat. It's only BMI. That ratio is even worse, which means the incidence of hypertension is going up. Moving to more non-communicable diseases like diabetes. 1 in 3 pre-diabetic, 1 in 4 diabetic. So there's cause for concern. But let me request this panel to delve upon some of the most transformative forces which are paving the way for future health in India. Some of them are in the technological domain, which all of you know, like AI, Gen AI. Some of those in the scientific domain, like CAR-T therapy and ADCs and cell and gene therapy, so on and so forth, to name a few. How do all of these converge? How do we use them to bring healthcare to where it's needed most? To that extent, I'll request this eminent panel, most of them very well-known names in this country in the field of medicine, public health, emergency medicine, and all this, so on and so forth, to delve upon these forces. And I wish my colleague Jerry to lead this panel going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joydeep, and thank you for sharing such grim statistics for us to address on the panel today. And as Joydeep mentioned, we're going to be talking about how organizations across the care ecosystem are using generative AI and other modern emerging technologies to really advance well-being and care outcomes to advance toward the future of health. So, Dr. Hari, we'll start with you. As a preeminent physician leader, you've witnessed firsthand the critical importance that timely decision-making has in oftentimes life and death situations. Could you share some examples about how Care Hospitals specifically is using advanced technologies like AI or predictive analytics to enhance the speed, the accuracy, and even the personalization of treatment protocols?
Sure. First, I would like to thank BioAsia and Deloitte for giving me an opportunity to be here. And those of you who have a little bit of gray hair would remember that ambulances in the past in India used to mainly ferry dead bodies. And we never had emergency rooms in any of the hospitals. They were called the casualties. And the casualties used to be staffed by the worst lot of staff in the hospital because they were doing nothing more than being a post office of directing a patient to a particular specialty. And a lot of lives were being lost. And as we're talking about transformation, this is one area which has been really transformed across the country. From ferrying dead bodies, today we are seeing a patient with an MI being thrombolized in the ambulance while the patient is being shifted to the hospital, not by the paramedic alone, but under the guidance of a trained emergency physician. That's the sort of transformation that we've seen in this country in the last 2 decades. And I think with the introduction of newer technologies, this transformation is going to go further, be faster, and be much more efficient in saving lives and providing optimal care during the golden hour. Now, multiple things have happened in the recent past, like the improved bandwidth in terms of connectivity, wearable devices, interoperability. A lot of things have actually helped us in connecting the patient with the patient outside a hospital setting. An emergency never happens within a hospital. Emergency or an accident happens most often at a house, in an event, on the road, outside a hospital. So if we are able to actually connect a patient from outside the hospital to a physician or an expert within the hospital, and under his or her guidance, the patient is being treated at a remote area, I think that's huge, and that's beginning to happen. That's the first thing that's beginning to happen. The second thing which is happening is all of us know that the most critical patients in a hospital are in the intensive care units. And it is probably the number of deaths in an intensive care unit are more higher because the most critical patients are there, the sickest patients are there. But it's not that deaths do not happen in the outside the critical care setting in the wards. While still in the hospital, there are a lot of devices now which have come up where every heartbeat of an individual within the hospital, irrespective of whether he's in the intensive care unit or in a ward or in a shared room, can be monitored, and early warning signs picked up not by an individual but by machine learning and artificial intelligence, and there is a alarm which goes off so that this individual can be attended to immediately before it becomes really critical and a life-threatening situation. That's the next thing which is happening with the interoperability and with the technology that is coming. We're able to monitor patients on a much closer basis in non-emergent situations, in situations also. India in the recent past has seen and heard a lot of young deaths, fit young individuals just collapsing and dying, sitting in a chair, doing a workout, just collapsing, and there's been a lot of news about this, and people are genuinely worried about it. And all of us know that these deaths are not because of anything else. It is arrhythmias. It is a ventricular VFib or a VTAC which is leading to these deaths. Now, if we had a system where we could monitor every beat while the patient is in the daily life and not do it with a medical device or with a device which is specifically meant for that, but it has become something which is done by something which is used routinely by a individual living in the community, like a watch, a smart watch, a phone, and I think we are getting there. And we'll very soon see a situation where the devices that we use for our daily living are going to become our health monitors, and they are going to be able to save lives and prevent people from getting into emergent situations. I think I'll stop there, but there's a lot of exciting news coming around, and I think we are in for a lot of excitement as we move ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And moving on then to the oncology clinic. So Raj, as India's largest cancer care network, how is HCG adopting modern technologies like AI or quantum computing to advance cancer care treatment, everything from early detection all the way through personalized treatment?
So first of all, thank you BioAsia and Deloitte for having me. It's a pleasure, and thank you all of you for joining us. I think to begin with, it's important to understand what oncology is. The first recorded case of cancer patient is somewhere in one of the pyramids. In spite of all the medical advancement we have made and all the improvements in outcomes we have made in cancer, even after sending the first man to the moon in 60s, every US president declares a moonshot on cancer. It's still largely unknown, rapidly evolving specialty. But there are a lot of advancements that have happened. We had the first human genome sequencing, took 13 years, $3 billion. Now you can do it in 2 weeks with around $2,000. One 500 panel of a patient, it's 60 to 100 GB of data, right? Imaging, the kind of resolution, clarity, accuracy we have in all imaging modalities. There is so much information embedded in every image, it's impossible to see it with eyes. This is, if you have to think about it, there is no other specialty where data, AI, ML can play a better role in advancement of science than oncology. So where the science of oncology medicine is moving from carpet bombing approach, whether it's in medical oncology or surgical or radiation, to a highly precise treatment of only cancer cells and leaving the normal cells around alone. Moving from one treatment fits all patients with same cancer type to treatment cater to specific to that person's tumor biology and genomic profile. So I think it's the most amazing time for people who are advancing science of cancer treatment because of this technology. At HCG, we have always believed that medical technology will play a huge role, and we've put most of our resources behind it. Now, there are two areas where we are largely working on. One is the area of computer vision. So, imaging, we talked about imaging. Can we do a pattern analysis on various imaging and do a morphology prediction so that we don't have to do biopsies in hard to access sites, for example. Can we apply AI on or deep learning on histopathology slides and study the parameters to predict the prognosis and the outcomes or recurrence probability of that particular cancer. With genomics, you have so much data. Can you tailor the treatment specific to certain targets that you have identified? In radiation planning, we have something called CyberKnife, which uses AI, ML, and robotics to target, only those brain cells with an accuracy of sub-millimeter, so that you don't damage the normal brain cells and reduce the side effects because of neurological or cognitive impairment. There are a lot of things happening. Our clinicians are really excited. We are partnering with a lot of players in this space. I think we should be able to make progress in improving outcomes way faster going forward than what we have done in probably last 50 years.
That's great.
Yeah, I can't help but butt in here. I'm myself a cancer survivor, and I can vouch for what Raj has just said. And I couldn't resist from talking about this because I could see my physician who treated me sitting right in front there. I was diagnosed to have APML, a type of blood cancer. I was completely asymptomatic. And then I had just recruited this young lady called Dr. Padmaja, who'd come back from UK. And she said, after diagnosis, she waited for a week, and then she came back and said, there are two options for treating you. I said, what are the options? One is the routine chemotherapy, and the second option is something which your genetic aberration which caused you this cancer could be treated with an alternative non-chemotherapy methodology which is less toxic. So my obvious question to her was, what is the difference in outcomes? She said, there's no difference in the outcomes are the same. So she actually treated me for my blood cancer without any chemotherapy with vitamin A and arsenic. And I was into remission after the induction phase, and I remained in remission ever since, and it's now 8 to 9 years since that has happened. So Raj was talking about personalized care, and I think it is happening, and it will happen even more in the future. I just wanted to add on that, Raj.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. So Alex, moving from kind of the bedside and cancer care to advances that AI is helping accelerate in pharmaceuticals. So could you share a bit about how you at Amgen are using AI, ML, and other kind of advanced technology and innovation to accelerate innovation, R&D, all the way from drug discovery through commercialization?
Yeah, happy to do so. So first of all, thank you very much for being in this round, but I also would like to thank the city of Hyderabad and everybody from Hyderabad to welcome us so nicely, as Amgen just opened their innovation center. So thank you very much. To answer your question, so first of all, I believe technology, and our CTO, David Rees, is calling it the hinge moment, right? Technology will help us, and especially AI and digital solutions will help us to really reform and reshape how our industry is going to work. So if you think about a little bit today, how long does it take to really get from early research to a product to the patient? This is 10 to 15 years, right? If we could cut this by half or anything taking off from here with technology, the benefit is for the patient. They're having earlier access actually to the medication we are going to produce, and many other of our colleagues and other companies are producing. So for example, if you think about clinical trials, right? A clinical trial could be anything to 18 months or even longer. We are leveraging today already AI models to not only identify patients, target patients, but also sites, and those models are helping us to actually have better trials in that area with better outcomes and shorter time frames. So that's one area where we are investing quite a lot. Another efficiency plays we are doing in the regulatory area around filing, and you may heard us actually this morning. When you think about regulatory filing, you have to go through thousands and thousands of papers to bring this together in a very manual process today. Today, with generative AI and with those new LLM models, what maybe took 80 plus days, we are able to do this in minutes. Now, let's be clear, when we do this, there's always a human being still involved and has the final review and the final say. But just the amount of work, is again cutting something down on the process in that area. When I think about early discovery, right? Again, when they are working actually, instead of like back in the days with wet labs and all this, we are using now AI models to really find new targets in scenarios where we can run, millions of scenarios to find out likelihood to actually be successful eventually. So when I think about this area, which is just the R&D world, right, I think we have tremendous opportunities as an industry to really start leveraging those technologies and those new models as we go on. All that, what I just described, comes up also with a massive amount of data volume. And I'm always like joking a little bit. I did AI when I was very young, and I got my master's degree, but the limited factor was able to process the volume of data. So that means the new supercomputers we are having available to us today is really what enables us really starting leveraging AI in all the different facets of a value chain. So I talked about the R&D world, but you could take this down to the manufacturing world, to the commercial world, actually getting those things to the patient. So there are so many opportunities where I really hope in the very, very near future, when we think about, getting a drug from early research to the patients, that we are talking in 4 years versus 10, 14 years, which sometimes is just too long for individuals because they need those treatments and they need them faster, and as faster they are, as earlier we're able to produce to them. So for me, in Amgen, this is a lot of areas we are focusing on, and this is where we're also doubling down in our R&D world as like other functions, but the R&D world is, I think it's a prime area ripe to leverage those technologies and those solutions across the industry.
Great, thank you. All right, Dr. Rajendra, we're going from the bedside to the laboratory and now to the policy space. So we all know that you are a prominent advocate for digital health. So what's your perspective on how AI and digital technologies are going to transform access to cost-effective quality care?
Thank you, Jerry. I thought I would ask you questions.
Okay.
I had my questions ready, nevertheless. I know it's we are almost at lunchtime and I don't see the lights. I hope most of my audience is sleeping so I can get away with what I speak.
Go by applause.
But having said that, I want to test how many are awake. How many of you know the right definition of digitization, digital transformation? Can you raise your hands? I don't see much. Either you're sleeping or you don't understand. How many of you know the 5 levels of AI? I barely see any hands. So Jerry, our problem is, before I jump into what AI or others can do is, now the lights are on. So what a strategy, BioAsia, fantastic.
Yeah, there we go.
So, the challenge I see, there is a huge need, looking at what Dr. Hari said, what Raj said, what Alex said, but there is not much commensurate demand. And I have been on the other side of policy. These forums like these, for me, are picking up the points for putting in the policy. And that's how India is. So let me give you a sense of where India stands today. I'm very proud to say, a decade back, I used to feel very embarrassed speaking in global platforms, seeing India right at the bottom. And let me give you some numbers in perspective, which is, I think, right till today morning. We have given out 754 million Aadhaar IDs, which is the highest in the world. We have given, right today morning, 502 million medical records linked to Aadhaar IDs. And we have 354 million teleconsultations, and this is the world's biggest telemedicine consultation platform. So as on date, India remains at the forefront of adopting technology, and as a policymaker, we always joke, technology is ahead of policy. First time we see India as a government ahead of private sector in terms of technology adoption, and I'm so happy that the government of Telangana has put up the GCCs, which actually is a testimony to the fact of what vision has been translated into reality, and people like Alex are banking on what we can deliver to the world and how it can transform. So Jerry, the short answer is, if you're not in digital health, you're not in healthcare. Simple. And AI, I think we have touched everything. We have seen sessions right from yesterday. Across the value chain, there is nothing that you cannot touch and transform with AI. Alex would agree, Raj would agree, Hari would agree. I think even my colleague from Reliance Institute would agree. Now, what I see is a very different based on what we saw, and this is something important for us as a moment of truth. If you look back at some of the videos of tsunami in Indonesia and Japan, what people were doing is watching the waves and saying, so exciting wave buildup is happening. And they didn't realize it was a tsunami. When it hit the shores, they got consumed by the waves. People in healthcare decision making today are like those people watching the waves. They do not know the tsunami of AI that's hitting, and I can tell you from the perspective of this, so my team was going around the stalls and talking to them. Some were telling, look, we do clinical trials, we don't do digital health. Some were saying, we are in pharma, we don't do digital health. So I think people should understand the broad domain of digital health is a huge world in itself. It's not just AI. Yeah. And this is what I see as something like a forum like this with leaders like you and others to update people. I think it's not a time to think and listen to us. It's time for you to jump into it because you're already late. I'll stop here for now.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the lesson on tsunamis also. So Elon, we're going to have to pick up from tsunamis and talk about how you as the chief executive at Rila Hospital, how are you harnessing the opportunities that are presented by new modern technologies and emerging technologies and policy changes to drive innovation of your business model and care delivery in the hospital setting?
Thank you so much, Jerry. Good afternoon, all of you. In the last 3-4 years since the buzzword AI come to place, at least 30 or 40 companies with the 30 or 40 AI solutions have approached our organization. Of course, it's very difficult to pick up all 30-40 solutions and implement it. So what we have done is we wanted to pick up top 3 problems or challenges or areas of concern which we wanted to address through technology. And then we found that we picked up 3 issues. If you look at one of the topmost issues from the patient's perspective, anybody you ask who is entering into the hospital, they will say waiting time is one of the biggest concern. Whether it's a doctor's waiting time for getting an MRI or CT scan or getting a report or admission process or discharge process, I'm sure they'll be wasting plenty of time in those areas. Even we have reviewed the feedback from patients. I think the waiting time is the topmost concern. I'm sure all of you sitting will agree with me. So we decided to find out a solution for the waiting time first. And for any hospital, it's important for them to provide the highest standard of care to improve patient safety and quality. That's our top second priority. Third was to improve productivity, efficiency, and cost optimization. So we decided to address these three areas, and we decided to look for solutions to solve these problems. So though we have implemented many solutions, technology solutions in our hospital, I wanted to highlight three solutions which have actually transformed the quality of care which we have provided and to solve the problems which we have been facing for quite a long time. The first was radiology. All of you know that there is a huge scarcity of radiologists in our country. Getting a good quality radiologist is so difficult. To get a radiology simple X-ray chest normally takes 3 to 4 hours. Some patient coming in for master health checkup, they have to wait for at least 3-4 hours to get a simple X-ray chest report. So we wanted to solve that problem first. Now we have moved on to radiology reporting for X-ray chest. Now we are able to get the report within 15 to 20 minutes. That's actually saved 2 to 3 hours of time, patient time, and patients are so happy now. Nowadays, patients are not only coming for high quality of care, now they are expecting more patient experience with a lesser wait time, with a less cost. I think they're expecting more and more nowadays. I think there is a trend changing in our country. So that's the first solution which has made a major transformation, I would say. The second thing is about the doctors. We have implemented AI-powered medical dictation notes in electronic medical record. One of the biggest concerns for healthcare professionals is documentation. Whether it's nurses or doctors, documentation is a big problem. Even studies are showing that almost 70 to 80% of the time spent by healthcare professionals, they spend more time on the documentation rather than patient care or quality of care. So by introducing this solution, AI-powered medical dictation in EMR, that has actually significantly reduced the typing time for the doctors in dictation. So the waiting time also significantly come down, and we also got good quality reporting generated by this kind of systems, so that it's very useful to improve patient safety and quality of care. I would say these two have helped. And the third biggest problem for us was maintaining drug pharmacy inventory. Each hospital will have a big challenge in this regard. If you stock less, it might affect the quality of care. Patients might not be able to get the medicines at the appropriate time, or if you stock more, your cash flow will get affected, your profitability will reduce significantly. Again, each hospital will have their own patient demography, own specialist doctors or specialist treatment options. So one solution may not be able to provide offer solution for another hospital. For example, if our hospital, we deal primarily with the transplantation and then basic care to the local population, and then this also has got a huge seasonal variability. Dengue will have hit only a few months. We cannot stock medicines for all through the year. So what we have done is we have partnered with one of the AI company. So we have developed our own model by training the machine through our existing data of past 5-6 years. Now we are able to generate a model where the predictability is more than 90% accurate. So in this month, we'll know exactly what drug needs to be stored for the next month. So that has actually significantly reduced the cost, also improves quality of care. I would say these three areas have really helped us to make a transformation. Of course, we are exploring more and more options. At the same time, it's also very difficult to change the people's mindset to adapt a new technology or artificial intelligence, whatever it is. There will be always a difficult, initial time there will be a difficulty for people to accept any changes, but we are spending a lot of time to educate them. AI is inevitable, or technology is inevitable. We have to adapt it. Whoever is adapting quickly will win the race, I would say. So that's how we made changes in our institute.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all these specific examples. Okay, so we've talked a lot about technology and innovations and how that's driving and helping us all push forward toward the future of health and creating healthier communities and improving outcomes for patients and citizens. I want to flip now and pivot a little bit and talk more about the human side of technology and innovation, specifically in healthcare. And so maybe, Elon, since you just just shared a lot of those examples, all that touch kind of the patients and the experiences of end users, patients, as well as families and care providers. Could you share a little bit about, well, we typically see that technology adoption lags the rapid pace of innovation. So could you share a little bit about, at your hospital, how you incentivize adoption of the technologies in a way that's going to drive the transformation? You know, some of the examples that you shared already. How do you maintain that pace of change and agility within your employee base?
Thank you, Jerry. If you look at humans, I think we are talking about two categories. One is patients as falling into one group. The second group will be employees of the organization. It can be doctor or nurses, whoever it is. I think it's really important to convince both groups to be successful in this field, I would say. So if you take the patients as a group, I think it's really important to maintain the doctor-patient relationship as it has been for many years. Now we have to understand that patients have got more knowledge, more solutions. Even if they type their own problem, they are able to get differential diagnosis now. I think it's really important for the healthcare professionals to get updated about these options available, even the patients coming into your office. At the same time, because patients are getting more and more solutions available online, they're also getting confused. I think actually, if you look at factors which determine this relationship, there are three factors, actually, I would say. One is trust, how the patient trusts a doctor. Second thing is human touch. That's really important. The third bit is emotional support, emotional intelligence. Now, scientists say that machines can be trained, machines will be trained with emotional intelligence very soon. So that will be gone. Even if some of the doctors or healthcare professionals are more robotic rather than more human touch in some situations. So in the future, robots or machines will be taught with emotional intelligence, so that bit is gone. Now we have got only two things. One is trust and second one is human touch. At the same time, if you implement more and more solution through technology and AI in the healthcare system, doctors will have more fear. One is, say I talk about reporting through radiology, reporting through artificial intelligence. Doctors might ask, if the AI solution make a mistake, who is responsible? Will the company take the responsibility, or it's a responsibility of the doctor, or it's a responsibility of the organization which is forcing the doctor to use some technology? I'm sure we have people here who's into policy making. I'm sure they should be able to come up with a solution. So we have to balance so many factors when you deal with employees or humans or whatever it is, patients. We have to address all their concerns. So that's my take. Again, educating people, enforcing certain things to make them understand that AI and technology is inevitable. We cannot stay away from implementing those changes. I think that's what we have been doing in our organization to change a cultural mindset. I think that's what we are doing it right now, actually, and then we are successful in many areas.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you, Milan. And Dr. Harya, over to you. Kind of while we're in the hospital setting, what's your perspective on how these technology innovations are kind of improving the experience of the clinical care providers, as well as enhancing the relationship that they have with their patients?
Sure. I believe that healthcare has four stakeholders. First is obviously the patient. Second is the doctor and the healthcare workers. Third is the people who are paying for it. It could be the government, the insurance companies, people paying out of pocket. And the fourth one is the community that we live in. Unless the technology which you're working with or which you're going to come up with impacts all these four stakeholders in a positive manner, it's not going to serve the purpose that it should. And I'll give you two examples of how all the four stakeholders could actually be positively impacted with the technology that's coming out. India, we talked about cancer and how the incidence of cancer is going up. Cervical cancer is the most common type of cancer in the country. And it happens more often in the lower socioeconomic groups. And the only screening that was available was a pap smear, where somebody had to go and take a smear, put it on a slide. It had to be read by a histopathologist, and then the report comes back. And by the time the report comes back, the person who's done the patient has disappeared from the scene. So that used to be the scenario. But what happened later, a great innovation happened. All these histopathology slides were put through machine learning, and they developed a high-resolution camera where an untrained person had to take a picture of the cervix. It automatically uses just the 4G technology to upload it to a cloud, and then immediately you get back information as to the likelihood of the individual having cancer right then and there before the individual disappears. I think that's impacted everybody, the patient, the community, and the healthcare workers themselves. The second challenge which India faces big time is tuberculosis. And the gold standard for diagnosis of tuberculosis is X-ray test, because pulmonary tuberculosis is the most common one. And even today, we do not have enough radiologists in the country to read films which are generated within the hospital. Forget about the films which are done in a screening scenario where lots of people are actually screened for tuberculosis. Now there is a solution today, as Doctor explained, where AI is used, where the films are taken, they go to the cloud, and you get back information as to the likelihood of the individual having tuberculosis immediately, and then there is a solution which is there for you waiting. So unless these four factors are positively impacted, I think technology would not be making the impact it should make on the stakeholders.
Those are great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Raj, over to you. And I guess, maybe if you can speak to, and I think technology is not only increasing longevity of life of cancer patients, but also improving quality of life.
Okay, so if I have to take an example of a cancer patient,
you don't have to if you don't want to, but you can.
He's ready with cancer. He has much
yeah, I find oncology fascinating of all the specialties. The something like CyberKnife. Okay, it uses robotics, it uses AI, it uses ML. For a long time, we have given radiation dose to tumor site, and the endeavor was to use image-guided technology, use intensity modulation to make sure that you treat the tumor and not, But some of the technology that is coming on is just mind-blowing. A CyberKnife latest model will do auto-contouring so that the tumor localization or mapping of tumor is accurate within sub-millimeter. Okay. The robotic, arm will make sure that it will, the tumor and the radiation delivery head alignment, it's synchronized while the head is changing the position using AI, and every time you do it, it learns and gets better and better so that you don't give radiation to other tissues. Because of this accuracy, we are also able to, let's take an example of a lung cancer patient. The lung cancer patient, when you're doing radiation, you're breathing, your lungs are constantly expanding and contracting. It automatically detects that movement and adjusts the site so that again you give radiation just for that. With this accuracy, you're able to, what used to take 25-30 fractions of radiation over 6 weeks, you can give in 1 to 5 fractions. Okay, so non-invasive, lesser side effect, more accurate treatment, lesser time because patient can go back to the daily activities and live life normally, better outcomes and better quality of life. there was a time when people used to say that treatment of cancer is worse than the cancer disease. But today, we've been able to make so much progress, and the endeavor is that you should be able to reduce this disease to a level of a chronic disease that you live with, like hypertension, with higher survival rate and way better quality of life. So the word C is not as dreaded as it is right now or in the past.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right. Alex, back to the laboratory. So how would you suggest, kind of based on what you're doing at Amgen and the kind of your perspective on kind of the combination of humanity and technology innovation, how can organizations kind of ensure that they maintain the kind of human creativity, the kind of scientific insights, and the kind of cross-discipline collaboration to drive toward innovations in R&D?
Yeah, the human is never going away, but just one word very quickly, Raj and all those people here, I want to make this very personal. I love what I'm hearing in our current cancer patients, and sometimes I like to make this personal, right? My dad passed away on cancer. My mom is a breast cancer survivor. That's why it is so important to have people like you, and that's where technology is just helping you and not replacing, and that's where the human aspect comes in. Technology will not replace the humans, right? We still have to have innovations from people, from the scientists, to looking for what is the next possibility to do. And I think, there's a lot of areas what we do is we support our scientists with technology. We don't replace them. In a lot of areas what it means is they can look at more scenarios, they can look at more edges and see what is actually helping us and how do we get actually new products on the market, new medications on the market. Even in efficiency processes, I want to be very clear, the AI or the technology will not replace anything. There will be and has to be always a human being in the mix who ultimately has to call the shot at the end and saying, is this something we want to do? Is this something we want to file? Is this something we want to consider even? And I think this is where we have to be a little bit careful, even so that I'm the technologist in the round. We have to be careful that we don't believe technology is replacing all of that. I think the technology is supporting us, and the support is just getting better and better and better. You can start, selecting the areas where you would like to leverage those, solutions, being an AI model, but also being. You mentioned robotics, there are devices we have today, right? I was just reading an article where can have a device just having on your skin on a mole and actually see the likelihood of cancer or not cancer. You don't have to wait anymore to get to a doctor after maybe 2-3 weeks having a diagnostic, then coming back with a sample after a couple of more weeks, right? But again, it will not take away the doctor, because ultimately that's the person who has to do the ultimate call what it is. So I think the human factor is going to be so important in the future more than ever, because there is a little bit of risk that we are getting overwhelmed by the information, by the data available to us, that we maybe just don't have the time anymore to look at all this. So we have to leverage that, and making sure the experts are the ones who are concluding ultimately what to do with all that information.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Rajendra, onto the policy side now. So given all the advancements in technology, what's your perspective on the role that humans or populations play in advancing health, and how could policy influence their behaviors and choices?
First, picking up from what Alex say, I agree that technology will not replace humans. Well, technology will replace what humans do. So I think that's something we should agree on. That's a fact of life. In as much as I think people can close their eyes to reality, but I cannot close my tongue to the fact that I have to speak on the forums like this, the facts they should be prepared for. And as a policymaker, I think, written 5 years ago that the next policy will be written by AI, not by humans. So I hope so that, and also there's a good tool that's developed in Commonwealth, we're working on that. But let me tell you the other side of what we're doing. In my tenure working with the Union Health Minister between 16 and 18, we launched the biggest insurance scheme. We launched the National Digital Health Mission. One thing that struck me always was that I met the head of OPPI, that represents multinational companies. I met IPA, which represent Indian companies, IDMA, everyone. The entire pharma companies came. They're all friends. I've worked with them in the past too. The doctors' associations came to me, right from Foxy to Pedicon to IMA. The technology associations, NASCOM came. The hospital associations came. But not a single patient association came to me. So I asked my boss, do we serve the patients or do they serve us? We got to take a call. And I think that's where the element of human, so I have to decide whether doctors are human or patients are human or all of them are humans. So when people say we have to be human, I sometimes have to think, whom are we talking about? Who's that stakeholder? But having said that, so one thing I implemented after that, after the meeting office, I set up Patients Union. And it was not just to be a union, we created an app called Patients Union. And in that app, what we have launched in the December version is that patients can speak in their language. We partnered with the government on Bhashni. It works in 16 languages. We partnered with government on ADRs, giving actually the power to the patients of reporting back to the government. And what we are doing as the next step, which will give you a sense of how when a policymaker becomes a technologist, what disruption he or she can do. And it can be totally maddening as well. So what we are doing in that app is, I think by end of this year, we will be perfect to the level of knowledge of replacing a primary care physician. I know it's very harsh to hear this, but technology is reaching that maturity. We tested in our office, so it told one of our office staff, you have migraine, this is the medicine prescribed, and she said, this is exactly what my doctor prescribed. So just imagine that here, policy will only give you frameworks. No one is talking about what AI can do, they're saying how we can regulate AI. Everywhere the discourse is on regulating AI. But even AI does not know what we'll do next. Now that's the way AI is maturing. So I think we have to be mindful of the fact that disruption is coming and it's an exciting time. Let me tell you that most of the things that AI will generate that don't exist today will probably solve most of our problems. But those who do not prepare for it will also not exist before the end of this decade. So I think as exciting as time it is, and policy people have no clue except sitting on this forum and hearing what people speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we're working up against the lunch break, so we've got a final question here. It's going to be a lightning round question, and it's going to be on the topic of future of health, which we've been talking about here. And future of health is a journey, it's not a destination, so there is no end, it's always going to be improving and evolving. So let's, I'll ask you to kind of transport yourself maybe 15 years in the future along that journey of future of health. So let's say we're at BioAsia 2040, and we're sitting here on the panel, and I ask you, if you look back on the past 15 years, what's the one accomplishment that you or your organization or the part of the health ecosystem that you're here representing today that you're most proud of in terms of the impact it's had on overall well-being and health of populations?
Want me to start?
Yeah, you can start.
I think 15 years down the line or even 30 years down the line, we would be still talking the same thing. The reason being, change is the only thing which is constant. We would have evolved and a lot of new things would have happened in this 15 years, and the whole, all the healthcare would have been disrupted and a whole new model of care would have emerged. But even at that stage, there would be evolving futuristic technologies, solutions that would be coming up, and we would be talking about those at that point of time. So I think it's going to be the same. It's just that what we're talking about would be different.
Yeah, thank you. Raj?
When patients get diagnosed with cancer, they don't think it's a death. They just think that it's some adjustment in lifestyle and nothing changes.
We'll hold you to it.
For me, really, it's preventative medicine. I really hope in the future we are able to predict actually sicknesses, cure them before they're actually happening. That is, for me, in 15 years, what I hope for.
Well, I may not be alive, but my digital twin, you will be asking, Rajan, when you were alive, you said this, and now this is happening. But on the serious note, I can tell you that we are doing a great disservice to medicine today without technology. Like, if I will eat one chapati after this, my sugar will be very different level. If he eats, it will be different. But if I have diabetes, you will give me glimepiride and metformin. How big a disservice is that we have industrialized medicine. I think what technology will do is map my phenotype, genotype, and prescribe me exactly what I need in the portions I need. And that will mean that from what we are doing, thinking of passive euthanasia, letting people die, we will give them active longevity, saying you decide how many years you want to live. Thank you.
All right, and finally, Ilan.
It's very difficult to predict what will happen 15 years later. Even the scientists say they wouldn't know what will happen in 2-3 years down the line, actually. That's the kind of growth is happening in the technology and AI field. But what I would expect to see is things should move from treatment to prevention, healthcare to well-being. I think that's the kind of mindset should go on to people's mind.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and that's a great way to end. Everyone, just a round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you very much for sharing all of your perspectives and real-life examples of how you're all leading the charge in terms of helping us advance health in all the communities we serve. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for a fascinating discussion. A very heartfelt thank you to our panelists for the insightful words on healthcare. And to express our gratitude, may I invite our session sponsor, Virtual Biotech and Private Limited representative, Dr. Makaran Javarikar, member International Advisory Board BioAsia, to please join me on stage. We request you all to please stay on stage for a few moments. Thank you. Once again take this opportunity to thank our panelists to take us through this wonderful discussion. And I'm sure everyone present over here had made the most out of it. And of course, thank you, Dr. Makaran, for doing the honors. Let us capture this moment. I request you all to just step forward for a photograph. We'll take one photograph. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for lunch and networking. We invite you to explore the exhibition area, please. Connect with industry leaders and, of course, enjoy a delightful meal. Please be back in your seats by 2 p.m. as we have an exciting lineup of power-packed panel discussion awaiting you. Enjoy your meal, and we will reconvene shortly for our next session. See you on the other side of the lunch.